Zoning matrix.
Zoning matrix. Say your name.
Zoning clarifications, okay.
We ready? At this time, I'd like to welcome you to our regular meeting this evening. We had with us this evening Pastor Michael Mathis, who is going to lead us in our invocation. It'll be followed by our Pledge of Allegiance. All who are able, please rise.
Once again, Almighty God, we're grateful for your omnipresence. Thank you for your sovereignty, for you alone are God, and there is no other besides you. And oh God, we're forever grateful for your mercy and your patience with us. Thank you for the many blessings and how you have surrounded and kept the town of Hope Mill and its inhabitants. Thank you for that, Lord. And as we come before you with a heart of gratitude and thanksgiving, once again, oh Lord, we call on you for mercy, that you would remove far from us anything that would be a hindrance to you bestowing the wisdom and the blessings, God, that you would have us to experience. And we thank you for forgiving us, oh Lord. And once again, God, we are grateful for our Mayor, Jackie Warner, her family, her entire staff, and everyone that works so hard and diligently to make this town of Hope Mills be the best town that we could be proud of. We thank you for her, oh God, and we ask that you would continue to keep a shield of protection around all of them, Lord. And we're especially grateful always, Lord, for our first responders, oh Lord, how they so willingly put their lives in harm's way just for us, just for the citizens here in Cumberland County. We thank you, and I pray a special blessing for them, oh Lord, as so many are hated for the very things that they do. And so, God, I ask that you would please keep them, oh Lord, and we thank you for doing that. And now, Lord, the agenda has been set, and men have wisdom. But God, we call upon you to endow the board once again with your divine wisdom, that they might execute the things on the agenda, Lord, that the town of Hope Mills will continue to be blessed. And we thank you now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. At this time, do we have any additions or deletions to our agenda?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to add a closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3, attorney-client privilege.
Okay, are there any other additions or deletions to our agenda? If not, do I have a motion to approve our agenda with the addition of a closed session for
Motion to
attorney-client
approve.
privilege? Have a motion, to have a second?
Second.
Have a motion second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. At this time, we have official comments, and this evening I'll start with Commissioner Legg.
I'd just like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. I think we should continue to pray for those in Florida and all other areas that were affected by the hurricane. Ask that God watch over and bless them and keep the body count very low. Thank you for coming out.
Commissioner Mitchell.
As with Commissioner Legg, thank everyone for coming out, and continue to pray for the communities that has been devastated by the hurricane, because as you all know, a couple of years ago, we was in that same predicament. And so by the grace of God, we were spared. We lost a little power. But from now, I think we only lost 4 lives in the state of North Carolina during this process. So again, thank everyone for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you. Just an update that I have, and this is Colonel Wilcox, who is the new garrison commander at Fort Bragg. He met virtually with Mayor Anthony of Spring Lake, Mayor Colvin of Fayetteville, and myself, and it was to make us aware of the Smoke Bomb Hill Barracks that they're going to be not only closing, but of the 17 barracks, they're going to tear down 12 of them. He also wanted us to know that the main reason, so that our public would know, is that the technology is not as efficient in those barracks. Also, the heat return takes water out of the air to make more efficient, and there's no system like that today. So trying to repair and to prevent the mold and mildew, they've realized that the best thing they can do is tear them down. So they're going to tear down 12 and try to modify 5. And the reason they called us to talk to us as mayors of of Fayetteville, Hope Mills, and Spring Lake is to make us aware there's 1,100 soldiers that will be moved out of those barracks, and they're going to need a place to go. Some they'll be able to place on post, but many of them they're going to be coming to our communities or other communities, and they wanted us to be aware that they'll be looking not only for safe locations, but something equivalent to what they would want to stay in. In other words, they want it to be in an area that's safe, but also accommodations that would be good for the soldiers. And they were asking how many apartment complexes we had and what type of rentals we had. And of course, you know, in Hope Mills right now, it's very difficult to find a place to stay. We found that with different people that have asked us. Spring Lake has some more openings and Fayetteville has some. But just wanted you to be aware that we do have, and most of the soldiers that are truly being displaced are the young ones. They've just been here possibly a year or so, and many of them do not have transportation. So that's the other problem, is when they are displaced like this, they've got to have a way to get back to work. So that was the main thing with Colonel Wilcox, but I was very impressed with him. He did a great job of telling us that he wanted to be a part of our community, and he wanted to stress that he would let us know and give us updates as needed. And now, turn over to Mayor Pro Tem.
Good afternoon. It's good to see everybody. I would just like to give you all the short notice. There is the Zeta Phi Beta sorority is hosting their 2nd annual domestic violence pinwheel planting ceremony tomorrow at 5:30, and that will be at the Rain Garden near the lake. And also on October the 15th, there's a Sneakers and Brims dance that is going to be hosted by the Shakir family, and again, that's for breast cancer awareness. That'll be all. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Commissioner Scarola.
Thank everyone for being here. Thank you. As Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem said, it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Ladies, please make sure you get checked for our health. That's all I have.
Commissioner Marley.
Just echo what everybody said, and I don't really have anything.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, we have presentations, and the first one I have is one that's very special for us, and that is, this is going to be Fire Prevention Week Proclamation. Whereas every year, Fire Prevention Week is observed during the week of October 9th in commemoration of the Great Chicago Fire that occurred in 1871. This fire killed more than 250 people, left 100,000 homeless, destroyed more than 17,400 structures, and burned more than 2,000 acres of land. Whereas the goal of Fire Prevention Week is to raise awareness about the dangers of fire and spread knowledge about fire safety to reduce the number of fire-related deaths and injuries. Whereas the Hope Mills Fire Department is joining the National Fire Protection Association in outreach to its citizens with a message of fire safety during Fire Prevention Week of 2022. Whereas the Fire Prevention Week 2022 theme, Fire Won't Wait, Plan Your Escape, works to educate everyone about simple but important actions they can take to keep themselves and those around them safe from home fires. Whereas today's homes burn faster than ever, you may have as little as 2 minutes or even less to safely escape a home fire from the time the smoke alarm sounds. Your ability to get out of a home during a fire depends on early warning from smoke alarms and advanced planning. Whereas the Hope Mills Fire Department is joined by other departments of the town of Hope Mills, as well as other emergency service providers and safety advocates, businesses, schools, service clubs, and organizations in their fire safety efforts. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Jackie Warner, Mayor of the town of Hope Mills, do hereby proclaim the week of October 9th through 15th, 2022 as Fire Prevention Week in the town, and encourage its citizens to remember this year's theme, Fire won't wait. Plan your escape. And at this time, I'd like to recognize our Fire Marshal, Bobby Carter, and our Fire Chief, Chief Hodges. Both are here this evening with us, and I'd like to present them this, not only this proclamation, but thank them for all they do, because the Fire Department in Hope Mills is second to none. So I'll give you this, I'll come down there and present it to you. You're welcome. Thank you. This next presentation that I have, I just want you to know that we're very fortunate here in the town of Hope Mills, and that we have some of our citizens that do take the call to help us and do it well and get noticed for what they're doing. We've had numerous people, in fact, so many that somebody actually stopped and asked the gentleman, "Can you tell me your name? We want you to be recognized." So what we've done is, and Sally Bailey, thanks to her, she's on our appearance committee, and she's one of the ones that I think made a point of getting name, address, and phone number so we could contact the gentleman. But I'm presenting this evening in recognition and appreciation for your public service to the town of Hope Mills, for your volunteer roadside cleanup, helping to enhance the beauty of the town. Your selfless actions set a great example and inspire others to follow in your footsteps in volunteerism. So James William Beck III, I want to present this to you, and I personally want to thank you, because from my understanding is you've managed to go anywhere that you find that we need to have some cleanup, and that's been the number one thing in our community that people have been concerned about, is the trash and litter that's on our streets. So we commend you and we thank you, and I just am very thankful that somebody took the time to ask you your name. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentations over to Mr. Jim Morris, who is the chairman of our Veterans Affairs Committee.
Thank you. So I would just like to recognize a couple of people who served for many. I got my back to everybody.
You could
That have served a lot of years on our Veteran Affairs Committee, and they made a lot of really good things happen in our town. We have a small town. If you've ever gone to any of our Veterans Day or Memorial Day ceremony, and last year for the 20th anniversary of the 911 ceremony, it's just a small group of people that are just making these things happen all the time. And so three of the people have stepped down from the committee to let others, but they've had a long years of service on there, and I would like to thank them for their service to the town, to the committee, by recognizing them with some certificates. So the first one is Grilly Mitchell. Grilly, I think, served like 6 or 7 years. More than that.
How many, Bill? Bill, no, you keep right. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Instrumental in making the 20th anniversary of the 911 ceremony work last year. And I appreciate you coming out here and taking the lead on that. And the last person I got here is Bill Green.
Yeah.
Good job, Bill. Just a couple things about Bill. We have a small VFW post in this town, and that post probably would not exist without Bill. Bill makes everything happen. He's probably 10 or 15 years in that post down there. He served as the commander. He's 10 years as the quartermaster, and nothing happens out there without Bill's expertise, his vast knowledge of all veteran activities, and he sat on the Veteran Affairs Committee board for probably just as long. on there. But when I first came to this town back in 2003 and went to my first Memorial Day ceremony, Bill was the guy that was up there making everything happen. And we're standing here 20 years later, and he's still the guy. So thanks a lot.
I'm going to recognize our finance director to tell us about this special award.
All right, we got a lot of good awards going around tonight.
Yeah, but I would, before he tells you of what this award is, I think he deserves a round of applause because Mr. Holland, along with our finance department, not only have done us well with taking care of the funds and making sure we're balanced and our audits are good, but he's managed for this third year in a row to receive this special award. So thank you, sir, and I'm going to let you tell them about it, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is the third year in a row that we've received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. It's the pretty much the highest thing we can get as far as the finance department goes for what we do and how we report it and how the audit's conducted and how the numbers are. So this Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by the Town of Hope Mills Finance Department and management. So I'd like to recognize not only myself in doing this, but my staff, Cindy Moore, Ricky Ramey, and Kelly Wall. I can't do it without them. They do an excellent job, and then with the support of all the other departments and the manager, we're able to make this happen. So it makes the finance department look good, makes the town look good, makes the council look good. So it's a wonderful thing for all of us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll submit, when we get this year's finished, we'll submit it for the award as well. And hopefully I'll be here again next year saying
Yeah.
we got the fourth one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, public hearings. We have none. And the next, huh? All right, I found it, yeah. I'm looking at the old one. We do have a public hearing. This is to hear comments from the public on amending town ordinances to comply with the recent change in state law requiring a violation of a city ordinance may be a misdemeanor only if the city specifies such in the ordinance. Further, violation of a local ordinance may not result in a fine of excess of $50 unless the ordinance expressly states that the maximum fine is greater than $50. And, Ms., who,
Before we begin on
Okay.
this, let me just chime in to say, what we're doing in this ordinance change is not affecting any of the actual, it's not increasing penalties, it's taking what we already had in the ordinance and spreading it out. So we had a previous ordinance that said, kind of a blanket statement that any violation of these ordinances is a misdemeanor subject to a fine. And what we've done is just taken that language and put it throughout the ordinance wherever it's appropriate to put a civil penalty. So it's not increasing the fine or criminalizing anything that wasn't already criminalized under our ordinance. It's just taking that language that was a blanket statement at the beginning and putting it throughout wherever there is a piece of the ordinance where it's appropriate.
okay.
I'll also add that section 10 of the ordinance, which is animal control, has come to my attention that the ordinance that was online that I used as the go-by to draft this is an old section 10. And so the current section 10 stops at section 10.4 and dash 4. And all of the things after that are stuff that we had eliminated from the ordinance. So section 10 actually doesn't need to change at all. And so you can
Okay.
remove section 10 from the consideration of these new ordinances.
Okay. So at this time, a motion to open public hearing.
Motion open public hearing.
Okay, is there anyone here that would like to speak on the amending of the town ordinances? All right, seeing none, hearing none. Do I have a motion to close public hearing?
Motion to close.
Thank you. Is there anyone here at the board? Commissioners, do you have any questions for our attorney? Or do we have, a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second.
I think your motion needs to clarify that section 10 is not being.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So motion to approve with the exception of section 10.
Okay.
I restate that motion, 10.4.
So the motion would be motion to approve the changes in the ordinance with the exception of chapter 10, which doesn't need to change.
Okay. Got that?
I've got it.
All right, motion to approve with the exception of section 10, chapter 10, which does not need to be changed. So I have a motion, I have a second.
Second.
Have a motion, and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Thank you much. All right, now we go to public comments, and I remind you with public comments that there is a total of 3 minutes for public comments, and that our town clerk does start a timer. The only
Do
problem.
you want me to read the write-in comment at the beginning or at the end?
I'll let you read that at the beginning. Did you give me the updated list?
I wrote the additional name on the bottom.
Okay, well, while you're reading that, I'll see if I can locate it, because I don't see it up here.
Okay, this is from Patricia Hall, 3511 Beechwood Street,
Gotta be on all your stakes over there.
to the mayor and Hood Mills Board of Commissioners. I am against connecting Sycamore Street and Pinewood Lakes to the new development proposed for Elk Road in case number DEB-017-22. I am against a gate application. The cover letter states egress ingress via Elk Road. However, on close examination of the plat and the fine print, we find a proposed connection to Pinewood Lakes at the back side of this new development. This route development of 384 family units is 3 times the number of single-family homes in Pinewood Lakes. The most logical proposal should be a permanent closure of Sycamore and requirement of a buffer. Pinewood Lakes was the very first neighborhood to be annexed into the town of Hood Mills in the 1960s. It has existed as a safe, peaceful, closed neighborhood for 60 years. Please do not allow us to become the first to experiment with an emergency gate. It may sound good on paper, but it has no benchmark or true value and could possibly become useless at some time in the future. Good planning and development has always endorsed the principles of 1, non-encroachment of established neighborhoods, and 2, maintaining quality of life of the citizens. Most all governing bodies understand this. To name a few examples: County of Cumberland at Hornsby Lane and Traymore neighborhood. City of Fayetteville, Colgate Street and Briarwood neighborhood. Town of Hope Mills at Cranston Road and Gulf Acres and Whitemore neighborhoods. When Highway 162 split Pinewood Lakes, a previous board demanded a wall at the end of Pinewood Drive for the sole purpose of avoiding that street from ever becoming a through street into the neighborhood. If the Sycamore connection is approved, it would allow a thoroughfare through our neighborhood and completely circumvent previous good planning. Please do not allow this encroachment on our oldest neighborhood. Please do not diminish our quality of life. I respectfully request that the citizens of the Pinewood Lakes neighborhood be treated with the same fairness and equity as the citizens of Gulf Acres and Brightwood neighborhoods when the board made the decision to close Crampton Road. Respectfully submitted, Patricia Hall.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we have Robbie Hicks.
Mayor, Commissioners, and all the good citizens here of Hope Mills. Thank you for the opportunities to come and say just a couple of words to you. I'm here because I'm running for Superior Court Judge in the upcoming election. And I want to give you a thumbnail about who I am and just prayerfully consider my candidacy, okay? For the last 28 years, I've been a prosecutor in the Cumberland County DA's office. I started July 1, 1994 with Ed Grannis. Billy West kept me, thank goodness for both of them. But I've been there working for you for that long of a period of time. I was the head arson prosecutor, all the fire chiefs can appreciate that. Top drug prosecutor, a federal drug prosecutor at the same time I was doing your drug work in Cumberland County. But for the last 10 years, up till this past December, thereabouts, I was the head homicide prosecutor for this county. I have had many terrible cases come out of Hope Mills that I've either handled personally or have, as a team effort, handled, and we got a couple more still waiting. I have done my best for you. I have been very, very happy to be a member of that office, and I hope that my work there will translate into the type of judge that will make you proud if elected. I'm also very proud of my community service, and I'm gonna spare you details on all this stuff. You can look me up on voterobbieHicks.com, you can check me out. But something I'm really proud of community service wise is my time in Boy Scouts and my sons, 14 years as a leader. Both of them made Eagle, and both of them are serving our country right now in the United States military. That shows you what kind of service family we are. And legal service, for the lawyers in the room, I'm currently on the North Carolina Board of Law Examiners. That's the highest board for lawyers in the state. I issue licenses, determine character and fitness to make sure that guys who want, and gals who want to be lawyers, like my wife, are going to do a great job for you and not going to rip you off. Now, all that being said, I've been fair, I've been consistent, and I've been impartial in how I've done my job as a prosecutor. And I'll bring that same tough but fair approach to the bench if elected. And if I might say, the best time I've had on the campaign trail so far, and this ain't fun, some of y'all know, but the best time I've had was riding in the Hope Mills 4th of July parade. We had an absolute ball. Thank you for having me there. Thanks for having me here. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Rodney Trammel.
Thank you, Mayor and council people. I'm here to oppose the apartment buildings up there off Elk Road. We live in a beautiful neighborhood, and this gentleman just made our case basically for us. The homicide and stuff that's going on at Hope Mills, you said you took care of most of them, right?
Yeah, a lot of people.
Okay? We don't need that in our neighborhoods. We have a bunch of older people. We don't need that. You say you're gonna put a fire gate up. Well, that's great, but who's gonna keep the people from walking around the fire gate? On the other end at that wall, they're walking down the wall and coming in. So what's gonna keep them from doing that? Nobody knows. And what about the flooding? What's gonna happen? These, if I'm not mistaken, this contractor's from Canada, is that correct? He's from Canada or from somewhere. What's he gonna care after he's gone about the flooding? Look at Walmart, all the damage it's doing on these streets down there in our development now. I don't know if there's engineers in here, and it doesn't really matter. But I personally ain't trust the engineers anymore because of what they did at Walmart. Look what the engineers did to the dam a couple years ago and it collapsed. What did the engineers do with these roads when they start putting these circles in them? The circles don't work. So why are you telling us, well, the engineers is going to take part of this and they'll make sure this doesn't happen, the flooding don't happen, and all this is not going to happen? I don't trust engineers. There's got to be a better way of doing this. Why not put single housing up there like across the road? Where I know if you have your own house, you're going to take care of it. But if you're renting, you don't care. How do I know this? My son works for a rental company that does cleanouts. People don't pay their bills, and some of them that do pay their bills, they trash the place before they leave. We don't need that kind of people in our community. We want good people in our community, people that's going to care, people that's going to represent the people from Hope Mills already and be proud of what we have. We don't need this. I don't know if it's going to be low income. I don't know what it is because we was never told. But I think there needs something that we should do to keep these apartments from coming into this area. We need some kind of guarantee that there's not going to be no flooding. And I know you can't do that. There's got to be something we could do to stop this from coming. The fire gate, what's going to happen if it malfunctions? Are you going to be able to know that the fire gate's malfunction? Is there going to be another way? You say sirens is going to be the only way to open it? They mock everything else that, there's machines out there that can make siren noises and stuff. Is that going to be able to open the gate? I don't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Steve West. If you will give your address, that way the people that are listening will know where you're,
Okay.
where you're located.
My name's
Thank you.
Steve West. I have the unfortunate, I guess you would call it, misfortune of living at 5030 Sycamore Drive in Hope Mills. We came to Hope Mills 30 years ago. Actually, when we came to Hope Mills, we had vast reservations moving from the Charlotte-Gastonia area to Cumberland County, period. But we were comforted in the fact that we discovered a small town by the name of Hope Mills. We discovered a neighborhood that we really liked. But I'm not saying that I'm totally opposed to the apartments, but I'm just very concerned. We live where this supposedly emergency gate's going to be located. Very nervous. I'm very apprehensive about the project. I'm not saying I'm totally against it, but I just urge you, as you go through this process, I urge you to imagine, just pretend you live at 5030 Sycamore Drive like we do. And when you go through this process of design and development, what would you feel like if you had to put up with this after 30 years of having a fairly good life? I awoke, I guess it's probably 2 a.m. Sunday morning, and tried to put everything into perspective about this because it really has upset me. It's not only this is symptomatic of other bad decisions I've seen chosen in Hope Mills over the years, and I just pray this don't continue. And when I say that, the subdivision that we live in was cut in two because of 162. Is that an absence of planning? I mean, what is that? That's one thing. We look at this cancer on the corner of Elk Drive and Legion Road. It's called a neighborhood market. It's only promulgated more traffic. One of the reasons we chose Hope Mills, originally I worked in St. Paul's. I could be in St. Paul's in 20 minutes. Now, sometimes it's almost 5 minutes before I can get on Legion Road from our subdivision the way it is. So the danger of possibly remotely connecting Sycamore to this apartment situation is just very concerning. And I urge you to do this compassionately for the people who live in Pinewood Lakes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good girl.
Next, we have Pam Riley.
Good evening. My name is Pam Riley. I live at 5025 Pinewood Drive. I am 4 houses from the wall that divided our neighborhood after I lived there starting in '96. So I saw 5 houses, I believe, burnt or moved out of that neighborhood. We're thankful for the wall, but it does not take care of all the noise that comes through there from the bypass. My main concerns, which have already been touched on tonight, are the emergency gate. As was said, it's not going to keep people from coming through there. People are still going to use the neighborhood as a cut through, whether on bicycles, motorcycles. We already have ATV issues in the back, so I foresee that that's just going to be a continuation. The retention ponds, I know that there's been issues with the Walmart retention pond that's been built back there, and I know that there was work supposedly done on that pond, but I feel like there's still water that comes through that road in back of the retention pond. My fear is that the retention pond that's going to be built, I believe it will be up the hill from where I live, will eventually make its way down to that creek, and when it rains, that creek triples in size on a regular rainstorm. There's a lot of underground springs that are back there, and taking trees down and creating this big pond, I don't understand the works of retention pond, and where is this pond going to drain? What direction is it going to drain from? Because it's going to drain somewhere. Is there any possible way that instead of using the emergency gate, that we could build a second entrance on Elk Road, 162 bypass? If that could be taken into consideration instead of coming through our neighborhood and disturbing the peace of our nice neighborhood. Putting houses back there as my neighbor Rodney stated, would be a better option. People take more pride in houses than they do apartments. I'm glad that Pat's letter was read. I think she was spot on. The other thing is hoping that they put enough barrier between the houses if you do go through with this. Be it a privacy fence, enough foliage that will block some of the lights that are gonna come from that we see from Walmart already. It feels like we're being just kind of, neighborhood keeps getting smaller and smaller, hitting from both sides. So the noise level, the lights, the pollution, if you say, from those two things would be considered.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have Brett Andrews.
Again? This feels familiar. I'm Brett Andrews. I live at 5025 Pinewood. I guess we know why I'm here. I was here before. We know it lowers land values. We know this for a fact. The connecting the Sycamore, they've already talked about. The light pollution, noise pollution, they've done it all. The springs currently coming off the hill are very visible right now, that they really are gonna have to worry about. How many here from Pinewood Lakes today? There we go. That's nice. How many got a letter about this meeting? Oh. Okay, we need to get better at informing us. It shouldn't just be the 13 who are abutting the property, because you can obviously see it's affecting more people. And what's gonna keep another group of commissioners from taking that and going, well, that gate keeps breaking, let's just take it down. Pam talked about the wall. Perhaps what they should look at is extending the wall that's currently there, and then across the property all the way to the wetlands that are behind, what is it, Hawthorne? And then have two entrances out onto the road out there. We know it can be done, because if there was a river in back of it, they would have to do it. Oh, I have more signatures. Do I give these to Chance, or? Okay,
Give her time
I will
for-
do that. And we still don't know who the Charleston group is, this mysterious group. Perhaps a law group in Fayetteville, or Canadian group. Perhaps from Saudi Arabia. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Okay, Wendy Soto.
Hi, my name's Wendy Soto. I live at 4909 Hemlock Circle. I'm in Pinewood Lakes, and I am on the road, or in the circle, that floods every time we get torrential rains or extra rain because of the Walmart, the retaining wall. Something that should have been taken care of when it came about, because most of us that live on that road have come up and talked and spoke and said we're getting flooding, and it still does it. And so with this apartment complex coming in, are we gonna get the same thing? Everybody kind of feeding us stuff, though, it's gonna be good, it's gonna be okay, we're gonna put a wall up, we're gonna put this up. You're not gonna get the traffic, you're not gonna get any flooding, you're not gonna get any of this. How are we to believe any of that? I don't. I've lived there now 24 years. We have had to fight with the bypass coming through, Walmart, and now this. And we're a small neighborhood, small as far as, it's been there since the 60s, so the houses are not overly large. They're small, we're middle class, and it seems like Hope Mills is just pushing back on us because we are not the rich ones. Why isn't this going somewhere else where there's down by the lake? Why aren't they putting it down there with those fancy houses? I know I'm coming across kind of mean here, but that's what it seems like. I pay my taxes. I do this every time. When I came up here and spoke because of Walmart, I was told by one of you at the end that we should just sell, that Walmart does not bring in crime, that we should just sell if we live on Legion, because that's what he did when Walmart came in on Main Street. He just sold his house and got the money. That's not something that you should be telling your citizens. We are taxpayers. We don't cause any problems in that neighborhood. And here we are again with a 3-story apartments. Okay, how is that going to, the light, the noise? Right now, Walmart empties their trash cans at like 4 a.m. So we all hear it. We get the flooding, we get all of this. My perception is our planning department is pro-development with no regard for the citizens of Hope Mills. Again, perception is that money is more important than the citizens of Hope Mills. Why is it that across the bypass they can get those $300,000 houses, but we have to have apartments? Again, people that own their homes they're not gonna trash their homes. They're not gonna come in and steal from us. And that's what this seems like. Seems like Hope Mills is wanting the apartments so that they can just get more money. Thank you.
Okay, Jason Hewlon.
Hello, my name is Jason Hewlon. I live at 4906 Hemlock Circle. I'm definitely here to oppose the apartments. I'm not naive enough to think that we can stop the apartment complex from being built, but I truly hope that the council can stop the entrance from coming into our neighborhood, the flooding from coming into our neighborhood. Something's gonna have to be done. I understand that you sit here and everybody says, well, we're gonna fix it, we're gonna make sure it don't happen. They told us the same thing about Walmart. Right now, Walmart floods my house. My yard is the one with 2 foot of water in it every time we get a rain, that I have to keep rain boots at my back door just so I can go to my truck after a rain. I've talked to Stormwater. I've been to Stormwater 10 times probably. They've come out there, well, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do this. Their answer is we have to disc the field between Walmart and our house. That's not a solution. We need to have a solution for the problem before it exists. The retention ponds that they have, all they do is overflow. The water comes into our yard. Now I have a 5-year-old that I can't let go outside and play, because if she does, she's gonna have to wear floaties to do it. No matter what we do, they haven't tried to fix it other than saying we're gonna disc up the field. That obviously does not work. We had rain the other night. I'm a volunteer fireman. I had to get up and go to a call. I had to put on rain boots just to go get in my truck to go to the call. And then I had to worry about trying to get them off when I got there. If you ever try to put rain boots on, it's not that easy. And now I'm trying to go to a fire, having to try to get rain boots off so I can put my gear on. It's bull crap. It's a lot of empty promises is what we keep getting. We don't appreciate it. We have a nice, quiet neighborhood. We would like to keep it that way. The fire gate ain't nothing but an arm. People can walk around it. Now you got riffraff coming in and out of the neighborhood. If the gate is what you're gonna do, it needs to be a big chain link gate that's on a roller that can be completely shut off with a lock so they can't even walk around it. The only time it should be used is with a Knox box, not a siren, because like they said, you can buy a siren on Amazon. All right, and not only that, if there's an emergency in the neighborhood, the people that live right there at the gate, now they got to hear a siren at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not saying that that's not a solution, but we can put a key on it. Every fire truck in Cumberland County has that key. We can open it, we can get in there, and you can have a big enough gate to keep people from walking through there. You don't have to worry about bicycles coming through it, people walking around it, or whatever. But we need to have a solution before we start building. If not, it's going to be empty promises, just like it was with Walmart. The people on Sycamore Street are going to end up just like I did, with 3 foot of water in their yard every time it rains. And it's not fun, because it don't matter how many times I come up here to town hall and I say somebody needs to do something, nothing happens. I try for different solutions. Well, I've talked to the manager, I've talked to the mayor, and they said there's nothing else we can do. There's got to be something we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Donald Marquis.
I'm Donald Marquis. I live at 3712 Colorado Drive in the Timberlake area. My comment's going to be very short. My concern is the intersection of Hope Mills Road and Camden Road. It would be nice if that would be repaired at some point this century. It's been a long time. It's hard to drive through there. It's like driving through a plowed field. And that's it. I just want to make you aware that we're talking about it out there, and we would like to see that repaired. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
Joseph St. John.
Good evening, my name is Joseph St. John. I live at 4939 Pinewood Drive. I oppose the gate completely being open to our community. I previously lived in the Cliffdale West community before the apartments were built next to that neighborhood Walmart. And when that was built, we had a dead body found behind our sign. We had a lot of kids' bikes stolen out of our neighborhood. We had the apartment also had tenants that were breaking into houses that lived around the corner from that neighborhood. So I would really be opposed to having any kind of access to our community. The gate is just for honest criminals. Anyone knows that you can get around anything if you wanted to. So I really prefer to just have some kind of solid barrier between the community and the new apartments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate everyone coming this evening, and we are listening. Just know that I think all of these reasons have been brought before us, and we've made a point of our planning staff has discussed all the things that you've mentioned tonight, but also the concern for safety, but also the concern for erosion and for flooding, and that is something that we're definitely concerned about. So thank you for coming this evening, and thank you for being so responsive for your community and for Hope Mills. We appreciate that. Next, we have our consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that you'd like moved, or do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda that's before you?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Next, we have old business, and this is continued from September the 19th, 2022, discussion of Southwest Cumberland Land Use Plan update, and this was requested by Commissioner Marley. Mr. McLaughlin, going to respond to that, or?
I just, I'm sorry, Mayor, in dealing with overlay districts, the workshops we've been doing, I had some conversation with Miss Moody, which is our representative on the planning board at the county, and she's talked to me a little bit, and I thought I just wanted to bring it up while we were looking at the overlay districts, because of a lot of these projects that we're doing, we're finding more and more that they're not consistent with that plan, and that plan is about 12 years old now. 13 years old, and I just wanted to get Chancellor a chance to come up and address, because I asked him some questions, and he gave me some good responses, and he's actually waiting on us to complete what we're doing now so he can move forward with approaching the county, and I'll let him take it over.
When it was first put on the agenda last hearing, Commissioner Marley and several of you I had conversations with, we have the study that we're doing right now with overlays. We have the economic development study we're doing with NC Commerce that's kicking back up. Both of those studies are going to come with very strong recommendations and very detailed information about the update to the Southwest Plan. And so the strategy is that when we go to the county to ask for this update, it's one thing to just request that it be updated because it's 13 years old. It's another thing when we have two plans that we've adopted over the meticulous amount of studying and things of that nature that actually provides the framework that outlines how we're going to update the Southwest Plan. So we feel that those study recommendations will help us with the county in terms of guiding what we're going to do, because it's one thing to say to the county to do it for us. It's another thing when we're providing the document to the county to say this is how we want it to be updated. So that's the approach. The overlay initiative ends in December. I do think we can probably kickstart the NC Commerce study to conclude around the same time. So when both of these studies are concluding, the very next step would be a very aggressive approach at updating the Southwest Plan. And just to everyone's information, that will have to happen through a series of very intense public meetings where the community comes out and things of that nature. So we're looking to start that process, but we're going to start that process with recommendations to base those changes on. But I don't think we need a motion or anything. I think Commissioner Marley just wanted us to have an open discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a little update so the board would know, because like I said, I talked to Ms. Moody a little bit and just feel like we need to work on the, trying to get this process moved up as well.
I agree.
So that's really all I had.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions about this? But it took, a couple of years to that plan to be written, the Southwest Cumberland Land Use Plan, and it is the whole southwest part of Cumberland County, and it ventures over even into toward Parkton and Rayford too. So the idea's got to be to adjust it. You've got to show why, and so I think we're on the right process. But
I agree.
Yeah.
And I will say, it was guided by the community and the county first. This approach, we're in the driver's seat. We're basically asking the county to let us do it, but it has to go through the county to be adopted. But it will basically be driven by the town this go around.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. McLaughlin? Okay.
Thank you for the
sir.
update.
Now where you going? I got this. No, I'm not gonna do that.
I got to stay.
Okay. All right, new business. Case number development -017-22. Consideration of the one at Hope Mills, R6 Single Family District Group Development Review. Hope Mills zoning ordinance zoned R6, acreage 46.22 acres plus or minus. It's at 3680 Elk Road. It's submitted by the Charleston Group agent on behalf of Fayetteville Christian Schools Incorporated owners. And I'll turn it over to Mr. McLaughlin.
As stated by Madam Mayor, this is case DEV 1722, group development review request under the R6 single family residential district. Just for informational purposes, the group development is the process that a multifamily apartment complex must go through for approvals. And this, I'm not going to make this too lengthy, but I wanted to provide you with a wealth of information that actually outlines what has taken place with the project. So this will kind of come off as a timeline. Staff was initially engaged by the developer's agent, the Charleston Group, in February 2022. The first case plan meeting was held with the Hope Mills Plan Review Team, and it was conducted on March 31st, 2022. Annexation petition was officially submitted to the town of Hope Mills on May 9th, 2022. The first public hearing accepting the annexation petition was conducted by the Board of Commissioners on June 6th. At that time, a public hearing was set for the consideration of the approval of the annexation for June 20th under annexation number 2022-05. The annexation was ultimately approved on June 20th with recommendations of approval from the Hope Mills Plan Review Team and authorizing staff at that time to proceed with the initial zoning process to designate the property under the R6 Single Family Residential District. There has been some chatter about the title R6 Single Family. A lot of people were confused that this is a multifamily development. R6 does allow for duplexes, multifamily, and single family. The initial zoning request was recommended for approval by the Cumberland County Joint Planning Board on August 16th, 2022. The initial zoning request was ultimately officially adopted by the Hope Mills Board of Commissioners on September 19th, 2022. Staff has conducted several additional sketch plan meetings since February with the development team, and to include a most recent one that was held last week on September 29th after the initial zoning approval on the 19th. The overall design of the site plan contemplates the construction of a 360-unit, 3-story garden-style apartment complex with the main point of egress, ingress, or entrance off of Elk Road. I would like to highlight, there was a question that someone asked about a second entrance off of Elk Road. And I want to make sure everyone understands we are very meticulous. I think Commissioner Mitchell attended the sketch plan meeting on 29th, and he was able to see the level of detail we talk about. But we did explore a secondary entrance off of Elk Road. There's a formula in our code that has to, it requires a certain distance between entrances before a second entrance on the same roadway would be allowed. The amount of frontage that the site has on Elk Road is not long enough for a second entrance on Elk Road to be approved. We did pursue that option at one point in the recent past. As it relates to the back to the development. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Can I just ask a question about that now? Is that before they decide to build, or is that after they decide to build?
Well, they hadn't started building yet.
Yeah.
This is during the process of.
So regardless, there is not enough for 2 entrances on Elk Road.
That is correct. So when we're initially having a conversation in February, we're talking to the engineers because they're just trying to get feedback on what the regulations would be that would govern the project. And so when we're looking at the site, you have these conversations of, okay, what are you trying to do? You're trying to do multifamily. Okay, those buildings have to be sprinkled, things of that nature. The secondary entrance is required out of the fire code. We adopted the appendices about 6 years ago, and that's where the secondary entrance is required. It's a formula in the subdivision ordinance that actually dictates where that secondary entrance can be if it's on the same road. I'll give you a prime example. Kensington Village in Hope Mills has a very wide entrance, double laned with a median. I think that was prior to the adoption of the appendices of the fire code. So we've explored a lot of different ways to get 2 entrances in off of Elk Road, but those regulations won't allow.
All right. So you're saying the regulation won't allow?
That's correct.
So it's regulatory, but there's no exception whatsoever, period, to that?
Not to my knowledge. We've had this discussion with several of the developments that have come, and there is a very specific formula that if you don't meet that threshold, a secondary entrance will not only not be approved by us, NCDOT is not going to approve it as well.
I don't know the approximate distance, but I have seen some egress on and off some distance, probably shorter than that in some areas. Now, that's why I say there's an exception.
I would say not knowledgeable about the specific project you're talking about, but that could have been something before the fire code changed. That could have been something before we adopted the appendices. But from my understanding, what we're looking at today, this conversation comes up quite often because the secondary entrances requirements didn't start until we adopted the fire code. And when that started, you have instances where there is not an area in the rear of a development to provide a secondary entrance. There's a piece of property off of Lake Upchurch that would have been a phenomenal project for our MIA, and the project simply could not move forward because 295 and a certain portion of the area wouldn't allow for a secondary entrance to be put in. He didn't have the frontage along the street to be able to put that secondary entrance, so the project could not move forward. So these are regulations. That's why I keep going back to regulations. You'll hear me keep going back to the regulations because that's what's driving a lot of the decisions. We're simply enforcing the regulations that are put in place.
Yeah, I want us to be in compliance, but at the same time, the citizens did make a compelling argument. I mean, like they said, to put ourselves in that position. And I just, based on regulatory requirements, I find it just kind of find it challenging to understand why there can't be 2 exit points off the main road.
And I'll get more into detail about some of those issues too, further down in the presentation. The project also proposes a total of 624 parking spaces with 70 garages throughout the development. The southeastern portion of the site, which is the portion of the site adjacent to Pinewood, the neighborhood, will be preserved for detention to meet the stormwater requirements, which also places a naturalistic buffer along the rear portions of that subdivision. There's also a 30-foot utility easement in this area that is reflected on the recorded plat, and there's a creek that must comply with regulations enforced by the state. So it's back to regulations. There is not a way to build inside an easement. They're required to record that easement on the plat. The state enforces wetland regulations, so there are regulations in place that, in terms of the different issues that the community raised, they all have been either addressed by us identifying the regulations in place that govern those issues in terms of environmental, or with respect to the fire gate issue. I'll get to that in a second. There's also a large area to the northwest with an existing cell tower with a drop zone easement that has been recorded, and several other utility easements recorded as well. This area of the site also will utilize a detention pond, which situates the entire development. When you see the site plan, the entire development is now situated in the middle portions of the entire 46-acre parcel, where on each side you basically have no development. And so we typically call those naturalistic buffers. I think it may be almost 200 feet between the first building and the Pinewood Lakes neighborhood. But that was enforced by the environmental issues that are existing on site in the easements, because the developer simply can't build in those areas. So when you see the site plan, you'll see the buildings concentrated to the middle portions of the site. And to the fire code, as required by the NC Fire Code, the site plan also contemplates a secondary entrance that will connect to Sycamore Road, which is an existing road inside Pinewood Lakes. Now I'll stop there. These are state regulations. I cannot, there would not be a scenario where a fire gate is put in and all of a sudden it starts to malfunction. That development is now out of compliance with the state code. I heard one of the firemen state that a Knox box would be the type of fire gate that he would be more willing to accept. Ironically, that's the exact type of fire gate the developer has already agreed to. He agreed to that up front. So I want to reiterate that again. Every issue that has been brought to us, I have been extremely transparent with identifying the state regulation that addresses that issue, or the local regulation that addresses that issue. And anything outside of that, I have to commend the developer, because he's been perfectly willing to do everything we asked. These are not requirements for the fire gate. The requirements for the secondary entrance. He agreed to put the Knox box fire gate there after we brought him the concerns from the neighborhood about through traffic. I want to also reiterate, this is not a chain link fence. This is a wrought iron gate with a lock that only unlocks with a siren. And so I don't want us to get too far into the weeds of someone being able to drive around it. I haven't seen that before, but this is not an apparatus that we feel compromises the concern that the neighborhood has with through traffic. When this gate is up, you cannot drive through that if you are not an emergency service vehicle. I don't know how you would drive through it with a regular vehicle, because the only way the lock unlocks is with the siren. There's a certain acoustical.
Madam Mayor, all right, explain this gate again, because you're saying it's wrought iron. So when I'm thinking of wrought iron gates, I'm thinking of like the gates that that's vertical.
There are several types of fire gates.
Or is it going to be an arm?
I'm not aware of an arm. I think the fire chief can come up and speak to that. But I'm not aware of something that can be compromised in the way that the community appears to be in fear of, at least from my understanding. Like I said, it's just ironic that someone spoke about this particular type of box, a Knox box, being acceptable. That's the kind they're trying to put in.
Question. How is it monitored?
To me, I would say it's monitored by the state fire code.
It's monitored by the state fire code.
Yeah, because it's a fire. The secondary entrance in the Knox box.
All right,
is
I
approved
guess.
through the fire
Is
code.
that something the fire chief maybe can answer? Is he here?
All right, another question then. The maintenance of the gate, repair of the gate to make sure the integrity of the gate is always intact and in sound. So those are some challenging, those are questions that probably need to be asked as well. You know, do the gate come with a logistical package of maintenance?
I would have to ask check with the fire code, the fire department to see who maintains it. I do
Yes.
know that the Knox box is pretty much done to facilitate emergency services. I'm not aware of who actually will be ultimately responsible for the maintenance of it. I would think that the apartment complex would, from my understanding.
Madam Mayor, ma'am, it seems like we're closing the barn doors after the animals get out. Should all this been addressed prior to permits being issued?
That's a good question. We haven't issued any permits.
That's good.
They haven't submitted for construction yet, and so that's another reason why I want to make sure we're having this conversation in the proper context. Because the last hearing, what was under consideration was just the zoning of the property. What's under consideration tonight is just the apartment complex. I'm giving this information that is all permit related just to be transparent, to show that we have addressed these issues at length. But they haven't submitted for permitting yet, so no permits have been issued. You can't actually submit for permitting until the approval has been granted by the board.
I just have a comment. I mean, people are distrusting of the government, and there's reasons, especially when the Walmart, and they have this flooding. So, I mean, we can swear up and down, we can say, you know, Santa Claus himself is moving into these apartments, and that's not going to give people a warm and fuzzy from the government. And it's a no. Shh.
If I can
but-
address that, I think a lot of people forgot, and we root ourselves in the code and the facts, and the regulations. Stormwater ponds, by law at the state, are required to be designed for a 100-year storm.
All right.
We had 2,000-year storms in a row. There is not a storm system that has ever been designed that could have actually stopped what happened with Matthew.
I agree.
What I think we have to be careful with is there is flooding in Hope Mills. All of that flooding is not due to development. Some of that is due. We had a hurricane this past weekend. And so I want to make sure we understand that our regulations dictate how these properties are
Right.
developed.
I agree.
But we have experienced a different tone in weather in the last couple of years, and I just want to put that out there so that this development isn't the source of every flood that has ever happened, because I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying there were other factors that brought that into play. So I'd like to go ahead and continue with the rest of the presentation.
And I just want to remind the citizens that this is not an interaction time, it's just a presentation. So I can't recognize you to speak, but, you know, make sure that if there are those comments that you have, that if you want to leave those, and so they can, our town manager or town clerk would have those, but this is just a presentation time.
Yes.
So I'll let you continue, Mr. McLaughlin.
This is the aerial photograph that actually shows the location, and I like to point back what you said before in terms of notices. I've also been very transparent with letting the neighborhood know which one of these hearings are public hearings and which one of them are not. I made it clear to several people in the neighborhood that this particular hearing tonight was not going to be a public hearing, which means that there would not be notices that would go out. So I want to make sure we're understanding that so that people wouldn't think that we're trying to do something under the table here.
Before you continue, Madam Mayor, I happen to live in a neighborhood where they use the streets in our neighborhood as their entrance points. and access points. I think most of this board, town staff, have all been notified about the condition of those streets. These heavy concrete trucks hauling dirt for fill. Nobody stepped up and fixed Deaver or Applegate Road yet. And that developer has not got a second entrance to that development.
I would say Deaver and Applegate are not good examples because those are not secondary entrances tied to developments. Neither one of those towns, streets are even owned by the town. So I don't think that is.
Well, the street in front of my house is owned by the town.
Yes, that's.
It's got holes beat in it that normally wouldn't be there.
I don't dispute that, but I'd also like to point out that Valley Inn was not approved with fire gates. So we intentionally made those connections through the neighborhood because ironically we were trying to circumvent Applegate, but that's a different conversation.
I understand, but I pick up trash out of my yard, trash up out of the street every day. Every day. Not a day goes by that there's not a can or a bottle or a sandwich wrapper. It was even worse when the construction workers were out there. I guess they're lunch wrappers and stuff like that. But I know what these people are talking about. I couldn't fight the subdivision next to me because I'm a commissioner, and if something changed, then it happened because I spoke up. I'm speaking up now some 5 years later, and now we found out the streets are not even up to our standards in the phase 2.
Okay, well, we need to get back on this project.
This is the site plan for the proposed development.
Right.
As you can see, what I explained earlier, if you look at the bulk of where all the buildings are located, they're centrally located in the interior portions of the site. The area to the left, top left of the screen, and the bottom right of the screen are all areas where no development will occur in those areas. So those areas will remain untouched and undeveloped. Now, they do have to put the ponds in. I think someone asked about that question. There's a whole system that actually these ponds had to be tied to. One thing I'd point out is the entrance off of Elk Road. We talked to Public Works about that street and the Sycamore connection being a town road. We typically do not take over streets in multifamily developments, but in anticipation of there possibly being some development in the rear of this particular site, we're being proactive at basically saying that that front entrance or that main road through this development will be a public road. I'd also like to reiterate that I think one of you said something about the concrete makeup of the streets. In compliance with the fire code, the Sycamore Drive connection has to be done as an all-weatherized surface, and that is because those emergency vehicles have to have a certain type of makeup of that roadway for them to be able to get in and out. So that will be.
Question for you. What I'm hearing is the amount of space that they don't have for a secondary exit or another entrance off of Elk Road. If they reduce the size of this complex, and instead of taking up so much of the front part of that land, if they just shrunk it a little bit so they would have access and have more land so they could provide either a double entrance or 2 entrances up there. Because what I'm looking at is they've put so much, and they've got the way the buildings are, that's what's taking up that frontal part, that frontage, that possibly that would make a difference.
It's actually the exact opposite. They need more land. The frontage that we're looking at is from the top left screen where the railroad tracks are all the way to the bottom right portion.
That's what I'm saying. Can't they reduce, instead of going this number of apartments, can they not be reduced?
That's what I'm saying. The number of apartments isn't a factor in the secondary entrance. Okay. The length of frontage the site has along Elk Road. So in fact, they would have to acquire more land along Elk Road to have the distance needed for that second entrance to be put in. So it's really the length of frontage that site has along Edwards Road not being enough for us and DOT to be able to say that the secondary entrance on Elk Road.
And that's fire code, right? That's just saying?
It's a formula in our code, but the entrance off of Elk Road, because the NCDOT road will have to be granted by DOT. So
I gotta look at that.
I would think it would probably be enforced more heavily on the DOT side, even if we were to, and we try to do this with several developments with that formula, but if it's when developments don't have enough land along Elk Road, what they're doing on the development and how many units they're developing isn't a factor into the secondary entrance. It's the length of the actual site along the road that the entrance is supposed to be off of.
I don't know.
Okay.
And if there are no other questions.
You know, I have a question.
Oh, what you?
Whoa, hold on.
I was looking at 12 on the tab, and the verbiage in there is jurisdictional waters. What is that?
That's basically when they say waters of the state, wetlands and things of that nature. So the state actually governs the enforcement or the protection of those areas. And so that's what I meant by saying that there are state regulations that are already in place tied to, because the neighborhood raised some issues about wetlands and streams and things of that nature. So when you see jurisdictional waters or waters of the state, those are basically signifying the state regulations that govern. I think even with the storm pond that they're proposing, there's a 10-foot easement required around that. So that's just tied to what I was speaking to about there being regulations already in place that govern those protections, which is why you don't see any developments in development for this site in that area.
You know, the reason why I asked that question is that waters are likely to be present on this property and therefore likely to be impacted by the proposed project. When I see language like that, it makes me look at it and do a double take for clarification.
Yes.
So that if it has an impact, what impact would that be on the residents in that area?
I would say that that regulation speaks to the impact it would have on the design of the development of the site, which is what I think you see when you see the site. They don't have actually any buildings proposed in that area. So I would interpret that regulation to state that the way it impacted the site is that it's in a way where you can't develop in those areas. Or if you were, now there are avenues that you are possibly able to sometimes build in wetland areas.
Yes.
You have to increase the finished floor elevation and things of that nature. They did not propose to do any of those things. So I think that regulation speaks to not necessarily, I don't want to speak in a way that says that we don't protect adjacent properties, but I think that regulation is meant to signify how it would affect the developability of the site in question.
Because that's why you asked that question, because I want to make sure that it does not impact the adjacent properties, because language of that nature does leave a little movement flexibility.
I will say with the state regulations and with our stormwater regulations, one of the main regulations enforced by our stormwater ordinance is that all waters have to be contained and treated on site.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I keep, like I said before, I keep going back to regulations. There are systems of checks and balances that go in concert with state regulations. So those local regulations and those state regulations combined, if you're reading from the condition sheet is 4 pages. And that is regulation after regulation, whether it's the fire hydrant locations, whether it's easements along roadways, streams, waters of the state, PWC regulations are in there. There's a lot of different things. All these are things that the developer has to meet and things that we've looked through that they actually will meet for this proposed development. So I don't want the community to think that we're just ignoring their issues. We are trying to show that the issues that are being raised, we do have regulations in place to at least address those issues they're talking about.
Is the driveway permit from DOT required?
Yes.
The way I read this, it's saying it may be required.
Yes.
So if it is required, when they apply for that, would they not find out then if there was any other way of fixing the entrance?
Basically, DOT will be the ultimate guiding authority on 2 things. One, that entrance. If there's a possibility of doing a second one, DOT will make that determination.
Okay.
I'm just saying we've already explored that. I don't think it's possible, but DOT also would, and if you notice on the site plan, you just see an entrance. DOT, because now this is where the number of units will come into play. Because it's 360 units, DOT is probably gonna require what we call a road diet, deceleration lanes and things of that nature. So they will tell them what they'd have to do to make improvements to Elk Road to get an entrance approved off of Elk Road. I will see if the developer will explore with DOT if there's some possibility of a secondary entrance. I'm just saying that when we explored that secondary entrance, we couldn't find a way around it, which is why Sycamore came into play.
The reason why I bring that up is I know that the other development on Legion Road, their secondary entrance, which is not houses, neighborhood market. If you'll notice that you come through the intersection and automatically you've got a right turn into there. And the reason those two driveways were situated the way they were, and also next to the intersection, it had to be approved by DOT.
Now, I will say the secondary entrances, we're talking about are only required
Well,
for
I know,
multifamily
but what I'm saying is another cut on Elk Road,
Right.
DOT could approve another cut on Elk Road. If this is the only, I'm not sure if this one opening in Elk Road would not be something that they would consider another possibility because of the amount of traffic that's gonna be going in and out of there with that many homes.
Yes.
Now, DOT has this site plan, and so what happens is, my department, planning and zoning, stormwater, fire, public works, and inspections are all internal agencies. You have two external agencies that have to get approvals for this as well.
Right.
One is PWC in terms of water and sewer connections, and the other external agency is DOT. And so we do know that they have the final authority. If there is an opportunity for a secondary entrance, that would be governed by DOT. I think DOT would determine if a traffic impact study is, there are thresholds that DOT has in their regulations that triggers traffic impact studies based on the number of units. DOT has not responded to the requested comments in a way that indicated anything outside of, they give us standard comments. They'll say a driveway permit is required. They may ask us to sign off on it before they review it so that the town is aware that someone's applying for a driveway permit, things of that nature. So those are the comments we received back from DOT. We haven't received any comments back that indicated that they are in opposition of the development, only that they have to submit for a driveway permit like they would with any other project.
Can we ask that question of DOT?
Yeah, I can pursue
Yes,
that. Yeah.
I think we should. One other question.
sure.
What is SFHA, which is Special Flood Hazard Area?
That's also tied to wetlands and things of that nature. So anything you see in that, waters of the state, those are environmental regulations that are enforced by the state, and ultimately, I'll go right back to the same thing again. In my opinion, that's the main reason why you see all of the development concentrated in the middle of the site, because all of those waters that you're speaking of are on the perimeter of it. There's if you look at that squiggly area near the railroad track, I think that's where the beaver, it's a huge beaver dam out there. To the south side of it, where Pinewood Lakes is, that's where the creek is. There's actually a PWC easement, things of that nature. And so the developer would actually have tremendous challenges trying to build in that, those areas. So I do think that those regulations that you're asking about, those are the regulations that probably squeeze the development to the interior portion of the site.
Madam Mayor, I have two questions for you. Okay. Just for clarification purposes for my own self, this zoning that we have it currently zoned as allows for apartments, houses, duplexes, correct? So even houses, correct?
That's correct.
That's, okay. Second question. Looking at the picture, it looks like in the little circles, number 8 is the electrical lines, the power lines. You can see it inside the big circle. I don't know if you can see it. Like I had to zoom in. Yes, there's a little number 8 in a circle where the power lines. Now, is there an easement?
That if you look really close, he's actually identified the utility easements in that, but that big circle is the drop zone for the tower. So
Okay.
they can't build in any of those areas either.
So they just can't build it. So even though, I mean, just out of curiosity, even if they can't build there, the fact that there's gonna be power lines next to a clubhouse and cabana and stuff like that, that's, I guess, authorized would be the question?
Ultimately, the direct answer to that is that you cannot build inside an easement. If you want to, the developer wants to build houses adjacent to an easement, that would be their prerogative and their selling point. But what we enforce is that, and that's why, if you go back to some of the previous staff reports, I had the recorded plat in the report where you can see that they were required for the annexation plat to record those easements so that they're actually part of the register of deeds and things of that nature. So whether it's a utility easement, whether it's an easement tied to PWC, whether it's an easement around a lake or a wetland or a stream, like I said to Commissioner Mitchell, I've seen people ask for no-rise certificates in wetland areas. That is what you go through to get the approval. You got to go through a pretty arduous process to get it, but I've seen people try to do it. What I'm saying back, and I'll say it again, this group didn't appear to be interested in building in those areas, and they just squeezed the development into the portions of the site that did not have easements in wetland areas.
Okay, and I actually had one more question, I'm sorry, so I said three.
Go ahead.
Apologies. So the main roadway that starts at the one egress entrance from 162 that goes straight back and exits off the other end, have they considered trying to make that as an egress point?
You talking?
That road straight down, yes.
Right there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was put there because we can't landlock a piece of property either.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would have to check with the fire marshal if that meets the intent of a secondary entrance because there's nothing that they're connecting to. But I do know that more than likely that was put there because of.
But that's essentially the same thing that Sycamore is for them. So if they're building it, they can build it and have it as an egress right there instead of altering their Sycamore Road and having it closed, and continue to keep it as closed. I mean, that's what their intent was good. However, I think there needs to be, there can be changes to it. The fact that they included that in that picture says that, no, we're going to find another way and they're going to try to go the cheaper route.
Right.
I would push back on that because that crossing at Sycamore, they have to cross a river to get that there. That is not a cheap connection.
Yeah, but now you're talking about having to put in a firebox where there's their own entrance, so they wouldn't have to worry about that.
That I would, like I said, I would have to check with the fire code to see if that meets the secondary entrance because that's not a connection to anything. If you look at Sweetwater across the street, the secondary entrance to the backside of that connects with WhatsApp, which is an existing neighborhood. So I'm not sure. I do think that they probably chose Sycamore because it's an existing neighborhood. But again, I'll reiterate, when they agreed to the fire gate, that eliminates through traffic.
I hear what you're saying. I understand.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I got a few questions
Okay, go ahead.
if you don't mind. I've been listening to a bunch of questions and everybody's comments. The main thing I'm hearing is the through traffic. Even heard one gentleman say that he wasn't opposed to the apartments, just the complex, just wanted the through traffic. So another question was about, of course, the question about the gate and who would be responsible for the maintenance of the gate. The owner of the property, the owner of the complex is responsible for maintenance of that gate. It's inspected by the fire code. It has to be inspected annually. That apartment complex, the common areas of the complex has to be inspected annually. So during that inspection, he handles in checking the operability of the gate. So that would answer that question. Going back to the fire code, because I deal with it all the time. This board, keep in mind, this board did not adopt the appendices of the fire code when the fire code was adopted. That was several years ago. So the fire code and the appendices of that fire code are separate documents. in order for the appendices to be enforceable by the town, by the fire marshal, whoever's doing the fire inspection, it has to be adopted. So, in saying that, that would eliminate, if we didn't have the appendices adopted, or the town hadn't adopted the appendices, with the apartments being sprinklered and everything like that, you could technically go with one entrance
I'm glad
into
you
that
brought
complex.
up because, not to cut you off, and I'm trying to reiterate, we look at these things at every angle imaginable. Our town manager can tell you, we're actually trying to.
So now I will say this. The appendices of the fire code are good in some aspects. Some aspects is bad because it causes situations like this when they're adopted. Now I will say that the new fire code that's coming out in 23, 24 time frame, there is mention in that fire code that they are going to include the appendices as part of the fire code, which when the fire code is adopted, which we have to do, it'll be a part of it and there won't be no way around it. What I'm saying is right now at this time, we have a way that we can get around it if we don't have the appendices adopted right now. I don't know what the legalities of that are. It would be a simple motion of the board, and that'll be a question for the attorney, but to unadopt them, and we could get by with that. But you know, you couldn't do that fairly for this one project and then readopt them for the next projects. You couldn't do that. So if you unadopted them, they'd have to be unadopted for the duration until it becomes part of the fire code. That'd be a legal question for the attorney. I just wanted to throw that out there because I deal with the fire code every day. So that's one way to get around it, make everybody happy, make everybody in here happy. I feel like it would. That's one solution to the question, but I don't know. Like I said, we need to check on that. In saying that we need to check on it, I don't know if anybody else got any more questions or anything, because if not, I would.
do. I have one.
Okay.
Because if that's a town street, if it's not a town street and it becomes a driveway into that apartment complex, is that not better for everybody involved? Because if we're taking that a town street, how many acres are next after this acreage?
More than this.
That's what I'm saying. So we're creating a town street, which automatically gives access to the more than this acreage back there, which then would give.
Well, the thought process in that is if we don't, and we talked with at length with Public Works Director about this, and we because we typically don't do this in multifamily. If we don't explore this option or that main road coming through being a town road and there's a subdivision developed behind that subdivision is going to be developed with roads that do become town roads. Now we'd be driving through a non-public street to be able to maintain a public street. That's the thought process that went behind.
But it could be that then that acreage could have its way in and way out from some other side. In other words, what I'm looking at personally is that you've got these 600, which could be, depends on how many people are living there, how many people would be there, and then if that street continues on through, I don't know how much land there is there, but I'm also looking at the land that's on Camden Road. There's another piece that's a large piece. So you've got now a possibility of
No, I completely.
not only
understand
be
your point.
overwhelming for a town street, but it would be also overwhelming for the community because the number of people that would be in a small amount of space.
Madam Mayor, okay. Finish? Madam Mayor, with all the discussion we have going on back and forth with this and based on what Commissioner Marley just mentioned, I think we should table this and get some answers, get some clarification to this so that we can make a more informed decision. I don't know what the process is. Can we do it or not?
That's what I was going to do. That's what I was going to do. I was going to try to make a motion.
I'm gonna
go ahead.
Caution against that, and the reason why is because development review applications are permits by right. what my motion in your staff report says, and if you notice, this is the exact language I put in every subdivision approval, every site plan approval. The burden of proof for these type of developments are whether or not they are in compliance with the regulations. We do not have the legal authority to deny these projects at this stage.
Ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
No, we're not.
I'm with Commissioner Mitchell. I would like to make a motion to delay consideration. I'm not saying deny.
All right.
I'm just saying with all the questions, to give us a couple more weeks to answer these questions, and I understand what you're saying, and we can ask the attorney, but to me, a motion to delay till the next meeting. So I know Commissioner Mitchell had a question that he needed answered. I know Ms. Corollas had some. I had a comment. I mean, I feel like we need to explore this.
I'll push back a little bit because the question Mr. Mitchell has is tied to an external approval. So I can provide you with information from NCDOT, but we wouldn't be granting the approval of that secondary or single entrance off of Elk Road. So I don't want to give the community a false sense that we're going to delay this to provide answers that we haven't already provided.
And if what we've provided tonight is all we can provide, then that's what we can do. But I mean, I think I would feel better about coming back at the next meeting and taking a vote on
Our
it.
town manager wants to speak.
So this is a preliminary plan. We don't know what the actual intent and items to review are until they submit for permits. And that's when we actually look at, this Corps of Engineer and the wetlands. By code and by state law, we can't isolate properties. We have to have the connections. We have to have the secondary access for fire. The gate is a suggestion. That's a town road over there where they're connecting to. So by right, we're working on those issues, but we don't have the answers. This process is an administrative process, and you need to be able to have the idea of the concept, but our staff is required.
And I reiterate what he's saying. Everything that I'm addressing here are all permit-related issues that will be addressed when the plans are submitted. I'm just addressing them at this stage so that the neighborhood has answers to the issues that they're raising. Typically, everything that is tied to these issues, whether it's stormwater, whether it's secondary entrance, waters of the state, these things are evaluated for approval at the permitting process. What you have under consideration tonight is just the approval of the apartment complex.
So what's the legalities if we don't vote on it tonight and we delay it?
There's nothing per se illegal about that, but I guess to reiterate what Chancellor and Scott were saying, this is really just an application of do they meet the requirements of the code, and if they do, you have to grant it. If they don't, you have to deny it. So it really, this particular decision is really more done at a staff level than board level. And I think one thing we were talking about is these, at some point during the process, these started coming before the board, even though they're not really something that the board ultimately is deciding.
To provide context to that, these cases like this were typically all done administratively at the county level. When Town Manager John Ellis was here, he felt a little nervous about the board not being aware of projects because what you guys will see is that it's a project under construction now. You didn't know about the project. So he started having these put on the agendas mostly as informational, but I had concerns because of this very moment we're in now, because we would get to a point where we're contemplating denying a project that is a permit by right. I will say it again, we can't, which is why the burden of proof is it in compliance with the underlying zoning of R6? It is. But what he's getting at is we've actually moved possibly to try to push some of these to consent. Ironically, we just approved a subdivision on consent tonight.
Okay.
This was on consent, and just to be transparent, I went to our town clerk and had her pull it so we can provide answers to the community. So while I'm answering questions about fire gates and stormwater systems, Those typically are not discussed at this level at all. They're required, they're actually regulated when someone submits a stormwater permit to Beth. She regulates the compliance with that through her ordinance. When someone submits to DOT, they regulate the compliance and the construction of it through their ordinances. We're here discussing R6 zoning regulations and whether or not this development is in compliance with that. That's technically what we're here. So that's why if you notice every staff report I give, this is a very crafted recommendation that basically states as the burden of proof for a site plan review request is in compliance with the development controls of the underlying zoning district, staff recommends approval of this request.
All right.
Proposal complies with the regulations outlined in the Town of Hope Mills zoning ordinance that governs the R6 single family residential district.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
for clarification and clarification purpose only, we are not trying to decide whether or not to deny. We are trying to see, can we make the decision that's in the best interest of all parties involved, to include the developers, especially the concern is egress. The concern is barriers and questions for clarification so that we can find, do we go left, do we go right? Because either way, we gotta make a decision, yeah or nay. But the bottom line is, there's a couple of questions that was brought up that, need some clarification to, that's all.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
And what I'm hearing you saying is at this stage legally, we cannot deny this
can't,
project.
especially
So
when
the questions would
clarification
come
you're
at the
asking
next
for-
phase.
Yes, but what I want to reiterate, the questions he's asking for clarification for are outside of the zoning district. We're not governing fire gate entrances and secondary entrances through the R6 zoning district. That's regulated by the fire code, that's regulated by NCDOT at permitting for construction. What we have now is a site plan. Does the density meet the density requirements of R6? Yes, it does. Does it meet the parking requirement? They are probably parking 150 spaces over the parking requirement. So I'm trying to keep everybody within the lines of, this is consideration of compliance with R6 zoning. I'm asking and addressing a lot of questions outside of that, just trying to be transparent. But these issues will be addressed at permitting
Okay.
once they submit their plan.
Oh.
I think just to put a button on it, the bottom line for tonight is if they met the requirements of the zoning district, then we have no choice, we have to grant.
Okay.
that. And what I'm hearing is that they have. And so the next stage is where some of these.
Can be addressed.
come into play.
Okay.
So really, as we go forward in these, and I think we've had this discussion before at some point, that, these reviews really are typically, because it's just doesn't comply or not comply, that really could be done at a staff level. It really has been previously done at a staff level. For whatever reason, it was decided at some point that they need to come before the board. But I think in some ways, it puts y'all in a tough position, because we're presenting this to you as, here's all this stuff, and you get all these comments, but you have no choice but to, grant the application, grant permit based on the meeting.
Okay.
So going forward, maybe this piece of it should be done at the staff level, and then where more discretion comes in, that then comes before the board.
So essentially, we're being held to this fire when we are not subject matter experts, but we're getting thrown under the bus regardless. So, just for sake of argument, what if we decide and vote no? What are the consequences? Because obviously we are forced to vote yes. So.
Well, I think, they would have probably a legal action against the town.
My recommendation on these is that you present them as informational items.
And I agree with town manager. We spoke about, because again, I want the transparency of everyone being aware of what's going on. So when we talked about not maybe putting them on the agenda for approval, but provided to you guys in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through a manager's report, whether it's informational. I do not.
Presentation.
I agree with the notion that, because when I was here, and I think a lot of the board members at the time that were here, you had no idea. You driving down the street and you see something under construction, you don't even know what the project is. So understand the desire for the information on it, but to put these on the agenda like this is the concern I have.
All right, just for, yeah, just clarification though, next steps, the next steps. We have no way of doing anything about the next steps. I mean, they have to meet the requirements, they have to get the permits. But that I think is the concern. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, what caused these to start being put on our agenda was a situation that happened. In fact, my first night as mayor in 2012, we had a situation where a community came in full force and it was too late. And again, same kind of scenario, and who had to reap the benefits of that is this board.
Yes, I agree.
So somehow along the way, there's got to be a happy medium, because otherwise, whatever happens in the community, once it's done, this is who is held accountable, not our staff. And that's why, if this information is true, but I think the main thing is, how do we make sure that, just like our overlay district, that's to govern how things are happening in Hope Mills, we're still held accountable for this, or this board is. I can always say I don't have a vote, but the thing about it is, they're held accountable for whatever action anybody takes in Hope Mills.
I agree with that 100%, which is why you see me up here routinely educating. Because if you listen to my presentations, I actually provide a lot of information on this is what this means. So my take is, the board, the general public, and everyone should be educated on what the regulations are, how they are governed, so our expectations and realistic expectations are set in a realistic way. When we're having these conversations, if we even were talking about permitting, you're talking about next steps, they would submit for permitting. I have permits on my desk right now that are gonna sit there until they show us they're gonna meet the regulations.
Okay.
So even after you've approved it, if they don't meet the regulations, nothing is going to be built. So there are, I keep saying, systems of checks and balances.
As long as they meet regulations, our say means nothing.
I would say the regulations in our zoning ordinances and our state codes are there for a reason. Most of them are there to provide the protections to adjacent properties and communities outright. Now, we have to make sure we understand.
Yeah.
If we are going to send a message at a record time where there is a lot of interest in Hope Mills, we need to be careful sending a message that someone can purchase a piece of property, meet every regulation in place, and still not get the approval that they are seeking. We have to make sure, because what you see me do is plant myself in the middle. I'm not developer driven, I'm not neighborhood driven. I'm driven to develop Hope Mills in a way that's beneficial for us all. So we just have to be careful. These regulations are in place for a reason. I can't put regulations in place, look at a project that meets the regulations, and just deny it when I don't have a basis for that denial. Because if that happens and we go to court, we do not have anything to show that this project was out of compliance with R6 zone.
And bam, there we have it.
Madam Mayor, ma'am,
Yes, sir.
one thing we gotta remember, we work for these people. It's our job to work with them as best we can. Not a billion-dollar investor, but a simple living family trying to protect their property. And Dan, I got a question, if I may ask Dan a question. What if there's a motion made to approve this and then nobody votes for it?
No.
I think an absence of a vote would be counted as a.
Yes, vote.
Well, it can't count it as a yes because we're all here.
Well, I think if you decline, I need to look back at the rules, but I believe that a non-vote is counted as a.
It's counted, it's
It's
counted.
a response counts as a yes.
We're working on, what if someone doesn't make a motion, or no one seconds that motion?
Then eventually the property owner would probably have a call to action.
Yes. Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir.
after listening
I don't
to,
know that you have, I mean, you can delay it to the next meeting, but to what end? I mean, if you.
Mayor, I'm good. Whatever consequences, I'm make a motion to delay consideration on this item till the next board meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, have a motion and a second. The motion is to delay consideration to the October 17th board meeting. Yes, sir.
Can I get clarification on what you're expecting to have back at that meeting for us to provide you with?
I'm looking for more information, whether they've did their research to try to find another entrance that will take the burden off these property owners.
Anything to do with the zoning.
You don't have anything to
That
do with
doesn't
zoning.
have anything to do with the
Yes.
zoning.
Everything
Excuse
you're
me.
coming back with, it has to be a regulation tied to R6.
Yes.
And I'm sitting here with,
All right, so based on what the town attorney has just said, and of course the information you provided, if we vote no, we set ourselves for legal ramifications. Am I correct?
that's correct.
There's a good possibility, and we don't need, and if, so right now, truly, we're caught between a rock. That's not even a hard place. You know?
That's right.
My motion doesn't vote no, my motion just
We have
delays
a-
it.
yeah.
The
Delay it.
vote on it.
The motion on the floor is to consideration of this to be brought back on October 17th. That's the motion on the floor. So I need to call
I support
motion.
that.
All those in favor, raise your right hand.
Of delaying it?
The motion that
Yeah,
Commissioner
second.
Marley brought forward
delay it.
is to delay the consideration of this to the October 17th meeting.
I
So
got a
that's the
second.
motion, and it was seconded. So now, all those in favor signify by raising your right hand.
I'll delay it.
2, 3,
Four.
4. So 4. All those opposed? So it's 4-1.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, the next item on our agenda is consideration of acceptance of an annexation request by ADJ LLC for 1.5 acres at the intersection of Brooklyn Circle and US 301 South, and approval of resolution number R 2022-28, directing the town clerk to investigate the sufficiency of the petition. And I'll turn this back over to Mr. McLaughlin.
This is I think I spoke with some of you earlier. This is an annexation petition that was triggered by staff finding out that this property owner or developer proceeded to the county to get a permit prior to annexation. If you're fully aware, we have a PWC agreement that outlines the requirement for a voluntary annexation when water and sewer services are requested. One of the reasons why we have these sketch plan meetings so well in advance is because we're trying to get the developer to go ahead and annex in prior to any approaching of the county, but this guy decided he wanted to actually pursue that. So what you're being considered to look at now is this is just the acceptance of the annexation petition from our town clerk about a property in an area that has experienced a significant increase of interest. 301 used to be the part of Hope Mills nobody really was interested in. In the last 4 or 5 years, development trends have changed, where there's a significant amount of interest in this area and across 301 at Chickenfoot Road. But this is not the approval of the annexation. This is just the acceptance of the annexation by the town.
Accepting the application and instructing me to investigate whether the application is sufficient.
Okay.
And this is in our MIA.
Yes, that's correct.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we move to accept the annexation petition and adoption resolution R 2022-28, directing the clerk to investigate the sufficiency of the petition received under GS 160A-58.
Have a
Would be-
motion to have a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed. Next, we have our manager's report. Is there any questions for our manager? Anything to add to the manager's report?
Let me pull my list out.
Speed up as I do.
Huh?
Let me pull my list out, Scott. I got a long list. Just kidding.
You don't have enough room.
I have to deal with this again. 4-17.
Apologies.
Same thing.
Any questions? No questions? All right, the next, of course, the committee liaison updates. Commissioner Marley, you have an update from Historic Preservation.
They meet on the 5th.
Okay, so they meet October 5th. Commissioner Mitchell, the Parents Commission, RULAC.
We met last week, and they was gonna do the event that was canceled this Saturday. That was the fall event that you was doing, Dr. McCray? I think they was gonna partner with you all. So that I think now they're gonna push it back. I don't know if they can do it with the new scheduled event with the prime movers, or they can do something separate. And they are making preparations for Christmas event that we're gonna have. What is it, on the 3rd? I think we're gonna be out there. That's what with the lake with Santa Claus and all the good stuff. They have a nice festive event planned, though. They have put a lot of time and effort in this. As a matter of fact, their goal is to outdo themselves, to have a bigger and better event than what we had last year. RULAC, I attended the Defense Conference last week that the RULAC was part of. Community relations in Hope Mills, not Hope Mills, but actually in the community, working with the military, advocating inside the communities, and of course reaching out to. I talked with the deputy post commander, garrison commander, and he made an interesting statement. He was talking about the food insecurities that they're not experiencing out there on base, and I was shocked. And so there'll be more information to come once I attend additional meetings. I'm supposed to be meeting with the garrison deputy commander in the near future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Scrolla, Veterans Affairs.
Coming up on, going from November to December, November 5th will be the Veterans Day Parade. That'll be in Fayetteville. And then November 11th is when Hope Mills will hold its Veterans Day ceremony at, I have time as 1500, 3 p.m. for those civilians. That's actually that's on a Friday. And then coming December 17th is Wreaths Across America, so you can currently go online and purchase a wreath. We have that coming December 17th. That's all I have.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, Parks and Rec, and also Prime Movers.
Prime Movers meets on this Thursday, and like I said, right now they're working on their concert at the lake, which will include the Fayetteville Orchestra. That will be the Saturday after Bites, Booze, and Brews. I always get them mixed up day on that Sunday. And Hope Day is rescheduled for January 14th. January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And plus, I think most of our calendars were booked until January. So that has been moved to January, and just the ongoing projects with Heritage Park, playground, chapel, basketball court. Nothing really new to report, but we know there's a lot of activity going on, and Mr. Morrison gave a presentation at the last board meeting, so there's really nothing that's different.
Okay. In case of the Mayor's Youth Leadership Committee, we haven't actually initiated it yet. Mid-Carolina Council of Governments and also the Senior Tar Heel Legislature, they're actually having the state meeting right now. And I opted to stay here rather than be there, so the delegate went in my place. Normally it doesn't fall on a meeting night, but this year it did. FAMPO, we did have our FAMPO meeting, got lots of information, and I'll get you copies of those things. Main thing was we did approve the STIP, and that's what the roads are going to look like from now to 2030. And then FCEDC, Municipal Advisory Meeting, has not had a meeting. And Heroes Homecoming, we had our last meeting on Thursday. And I did put T-shirts at your site and also the handout for the calendars. We want to get these out and make sure that our community knows about the events coming up, because it is not just Hope Mills, it's Cumberland County, Fayetteville. And then the other thing is on November, our first meeting in November, if you'll wear your T-shirt, advertise Heroes Homecoming.
What
And that's
date's
all.
that, Madam Mayor?
Sir?
What was that last date? Wear your
The
T-shirt?
first meeting in, our first meeting in November, which will be November the,
7th.
We have a thing right here. Where's that classic?
Better send out a reminder.
this is next year.
That does me no good.
We're ahead of November 7th? Okay, November 7th. But that, if you will, because the parade is actually the weekend before then.
Yes.
But we want to advertise because we have our events coming up on that next following weekend here in Hope Mills. And we are partnering with our chamber and Dirtbag Ales for the chili cook-off. And then we do have our regular Veterans Day fair on the 11th. Okay.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a question,
Sure,
please?
uh-huh.
The parade's on December 5th, I believe?
Our Christmas parade?
Yes. Is that right? Or 3rd? I saw it listed here somewhere.
It's on the 3rd.
First Saturday in December.
Okay, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna drive our own vehicles?
Yeah, I'm
You
driving
want-
mine.
Unless you want the Jeeps again.
I think I need to drive my own this year.
I would like to, because it's the only time it gets washed.
I think we can let Parks and Rec Committee, since they handle the parade, we'll get with them, and they usually give us an option,
I'm
so
gonna
that would do
drive
it.
my own this year. I need to put the vehicle on the parade.
Okay, staff comments? Any staff comments? Okay,
Joanne drives her own anyway.
I know.
okay.
Another
Next.
question.
Yes.
Are we planning any kind of Christmas get-together party or anything? I know the police department and or the fire department used to put on parties for the town employees. And I was thinking that the new building next door, that big common room in there, would be a good place to have a
That's if it's ready.
Christmas get-together.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's if it's ready.
Putting you on the
Okay.
spot, Jane.
All right. Staff level decision.
We're trying to figure out a dedication date.
Yeah.
And, you know, the architect prefers that we have landscaping and it look done and everything be moved in,
Yeah.
and he's saying March.
Ooh.
And Drew's freaking out because, you know, that means a couple months after they're in there.
Yeah.
Can have a soft opening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, soft opening.
I'm sorry, I just,
Phase 3 is supposed to be completed by December 17th.
Okay.
that's a little late for a Christmas party, isn't it?
The new parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to come up with a date.
A soft
Okay.
opening is good.
He'd rather not do it in the winter because nothing's blooming, it's dark early. He likes daylight and
We're gonna have lights in there, aren't we?
flowers and.
Madam Mayor, I would like for it to look nice, though.
Yes.
I would like for it to look presentable and nice and just doing, if you can do all of that, you might as well do it the right way and wait.
Yeah, got architects all about aesthetics.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we'll get back to you with some
With some
some
dates,
point.
some options.
availability.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to conduct a closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3 to consult with the attorney on the matters within the attorney-client privilege.
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Have a motion, and a second. If you will, go to the front conference room, and we'll try to make this as quick as possible.
It should be.
Time, I'll call our meeting back to order.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to move to seal the minutes of the closed session until such time as the release of the information would no longer frustrate the purpose of the closed session and further no action was taken.
Have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Have a motion, and a second. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Seeing none opposed, do we have another motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All righty.